So my name is Ira Chinoy. I am on the faculty here at the marvelous Philip Merrill College of Journalism, and I'm also co-director of the Future of Information Alliance.
Hi, my name is Allison Druin. I'm the other co-director of the Future of Information Alliance. I actually wear a few different hats. I'm also a professor in the iSchool. I'm a professor in UMIAC, woohoo, and I am also now on a 2-year leave of absence from the university, and in my first year working with the National Park Service. Yay! And yeah, there we go. Oh, yes, and I have my next page. Yes, here we go. So, what is the Future of Information Alliance? Some of you may be wondering, okay? It's a university-wide think tank without walls. The goal is to identify big emerging opportunities and challenges that are associated with the evolving information landscape. It concerns itself with technology, policy, education, relationships, and a lot more. So FIA's aims are to foster dialogue, like today, foster research and action on these issues, which also includes planting research seeds, both across our campus and with like-minded partners outside the university. Now, those partners that are FIA partners have a common interest and concern in the future of information, and they include the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian, the Museum, the National Park Service, the National Geographic Society, I'm reading this so I don't forget anyone, the National Archives, Sesame Workshop, the Barry School, WAMU Radio, the NPR affiliate in Washington, and the Office of the Governor of Maryland.
Okay, so the roots of this program go back to, I believe it was November 8th. Anyway, the fall, when the New York Times, together with its Sunday paper, sent about more than 1 million of these to home subscribers with their Sunday paper. It's just a show of hands. Everyone know actually what this is? You guys are great. Right? So you get that's 100 on the first quiz. And they were all sort of flat, and they assembled them. And, when you insert an iPhone in this, and we're going to hear more about it, it becomes basically an everyman's virtual reality device. And there had been a few news organizations that had gone into that space, but this created incredible buzz, incredible statement that this New York Times was doing this, over 1 million people got this, that it was a new emerging media had arrived in our lifetimes here. And the New York Times itself compared it in its sort of introductory announcement of this to what it must have been like for people, the first time photographs, for readers, the first time photographs appeared in the pages of the New York Times. So we thought, something's going on here. And we followed up with conversations with the people who are going to be our 3 speakers, Amitabh Varshney, Graham Roberts, and Dan Russell. And it seemed like this was the time to kind of start to foster a conversation on campus, running across disciplines. We have brilliant people working on this on campus, but really widely across disciplines to sort of explore this. And then as we talked to these people, also we realized there were these other really innovative things that were going on with images, and you're going to see some of them, and they're quite amazing. So this is our program. You come from lots of different places on campus, and
we need to give a few shout-outs to people. Probably on his way right now is our university's Vice President of Research, Pat O'Shea, who has been giving us enthusiastic backing and guidance throughout our many years of leading the FIA on the campus. Ken Gertz, the Associate Vice President for Research and Development, actually recognized 6 years ago. 6 years ago, we're getting old together. Yeah, oh my gosh. That there was a real opportunity to think about the Future of Information Alliance, and he helped to launch the Future of Information Alliance with a significant grant. Now, we have representatives of our partner organizations who I just named that are here, and we really thank you for being here. But we also have, I don't know how many of you have a brainstorming board, but we do, okay? We don't have an advisory board, but a brainstorming board. And a few of these people are here today. Please wave, because they're amazing people. Thank you, thank you. And they come from, they're representatives from across campus. that really give us a perspective on how information is impacting what they're doing and how they're doing it. We want to give a special thanks to our FIA Managing Director and staffer, multi-talented, Ann Rose, yay! Okay, who basically does everything from design to network and back again. We also want to thank the people from the leadership from the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation, who's provided major funding that has allowed us to do programs over the years, such as this one. And finally, thanks to all of you who are on time, not the people that'll be walking in, okay, who are on time. And thanks to all of you, we're very excited with what's going to happen today. And with that.
So before we go on with our program, we've asked Lucy Dalbush, who's the dean of this very fine Philip Merrill College of Journalism, here in her domain, the wonderful Knight Hall, to just say a couple words. And then.
Thank you, Ira. Thank you, Allison. Welcome to all of you to the beautiful Knight Hall and the Philip Merrill College of Journalism. We are delighted to have this program. When Allison and Ira came to me a few months ago and said, could we do this? We want to talk about virtual reality and we want to do it here. I said, absolutely. This is the way we know this is the way the world is going. And elsewhere out there, people think of computer scientists dealing with virtual reality, but the public and often other journalists don't even know what it means for journalism. So we're incredibly pleased to be hosting this program. We know that in the next year, we're going to be going into virtual reality in a very, very big way. Thank you to Amitabh, Graham, and Dan for joining us. This is wonderful. Graham has already visited Sean Mussenden's class today, and I'm told you are a rock star, according to some of our students. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy the program.
Great. All right. Thank you very much. So we just want to tell you how things are going to go today. In a minute, I'm going to introduce our moderator, Leslie Walker, and she's going to introduce our speakers, and then they're going to come up one by one. They're going to talk for 15, 20, 25 minutes, something like that each. After each one is done, they're going to take one question from the audience while the next person sets up. And then when they're all done, they're going to come occupy these chairs up here, and Leslie will moderate this discussion that they will have with each other and with you. So we hope this will be very interactive. All right, so it is my great pleasure to introduce Leslie Walker, who I first got to know long ago, far away in another life, when we both worked at the Washington Post together. And she's had a very long and distinguished career as a journalist. And for our purposes, what's really interesting, I believe, is that she's a pioneer. So she was editor of WashingtonPost.com back in the day, far enough back that we can say that she was back at this time, and it's really not very long ago at all, right, in human time, when she was able to recognize that this thing called the internet was going to be something, right? When there were plenty of other people who didn't think the internet was going to be something for news, and she said, no, this is going to be something for news. She's also distinguished herself as a columnist, writing for the Post about technology and business, and she knows that world incredibly well. And then, if that wasn't enough, she's written a nonfiction book about a murder mystery that's been turned into a TV movie. So how many people can say that? So I give you Leslie Walker. Thank you.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Ira, and a big thanks to FIA for organizing this timely event. I'm excited to be participating, particularly because I believe we stand on the cutting edge of a technology I've waited for decades. Yes, decades, Ira. That's how far back my roots go in internet news. As a technology writer for the Washington Post, I went to the Consumer Electronics Show every year for many years, and each year, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I'd see at least one or two backroom demonstrations of virtual reality prototypes and apps and headsets, only to be disappointed when none of them really caught on. But this time feels different. Since Facebook announced its purchase for $2 billion of Oculus 2 years ago, all kinds of major tech companies have been pouring money into virtual reality, 360-degree video, and related technologies. So much so that it raises the possibility we may actually be on the verge of a new medium being born. So I am delighted that we have 3 speakers here today who are working at the frontier of VR and related innovative visual storytelling technologies. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about our 3 speakers and ask each of them to stand as I introduce them in the order in which they're going to speak. First up is going to be Amitabh Varshney, who is a professor of computer science and director of the University of Maryland Institute for Advanced Computer Studies, known here as UMIAX. He's a noted researcher in computer visualization and health informatics, and he's taking a leadership role at the University of Maryland in developing new tools and applications for both virtual and augmented reality. In August 2014, Professor Varshney received more than $1 million from the National Science Foundation and the university to establish and launch the Augmentarium, a unique computer visualization lab that serves as a testbed for these immersive technologies. And you're going to hear a lot about that in a moment. In addition to research, Professor Varshney is teaching the university's first ever undergraduate course in virtual reality this semester. How cool is that? Next, you will hear from Graham Roberts, who is an award-winning senior editor for graphics at the New York Times. He's working on the cutting edge of new approaches in video, motion graphics, virtual reality, and immersive storytelling. He was part of the New York Times team that won the Pulitzer Prize for a seminal and groundbreaking multimedia project called Snowfall, about a deadly 2012 avalanche in the Cascade Mountains. That project is taught in every journalism school in this country as an example of really innovative multimedia storytelling. So it's really exciting for us to have him here today. His work has also been recognized by other journalism organizations, including the Society of News Design, the Online News Association, and he teaches motion graphics for journalism at the City University of New York Graduate School of Journalism. He speaks at journal schools and conferences all around the world, as he did here this morning when he wowed our students. And then, last but hardly least, we will have Dan Russell, who comes to us from Google/Alphabet, where the best description of what he does is Director of User Happiness. With a title like that, I hope you're going to tell us how all these technologies are going to make us happier. And for the past few years, he's made repeated trips to this campus as the Future-ist in residence for the Future of Information Alliance. Dan has a PhD in computer science and says he specialized in artificial intelligence until he realized that magnifying human intelligence was his real passion. He studies the way people use Google, and then he does 2 things with that. One is to work on changes to the search engine, and the other is to train people to be better searchers. His blog, Search Research, just go Google it to find it, poses weekly research challenges for students and teachers. And he's reached hundreds of thousands of people. I think that's millions, isn't it, by now, through 2 free online courses that you can find on powersearchingwithgoogle.com. And now we invite Professor Varshney to come up and tell us about the Augmentarium.
Thank you so much for this great opportunity. What a pleasure it is to be here. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about what we have been up to and where we are headed with virtual reality. So let me start by giving you my definition of virtual reality and augmented reality. So for me, virtual reality is either creating a new fantasy world or having a world that mimics our world around us, and immersing users into it so that they feel that they are embedded in that world. And augmented reality, on the other hand, is fusing computer-generated information together with the information that is around us. Going back a little bit, I started on this journey in 1990 when I came to this country as a young graduate student. At that time, I really wanted to work on artificial intelligence, much like Dan. And I show up there to my grad school, UNC Chapel Hill, and I wear one of these head-mounted displays at that time. Those, at that time, they were $25,000 a piece. It was a privilege to be having, my car was $150. And so this was amazing to have this. And it just made me a convert. I said, wow, this is really cool. This is what I want to work on. And so since then, I've been looking into various aspects of this. And starting a few years ago, a perfect storm started emerging. On one hand, we had these massively parallel graphics processing units that became smaller, consumed less power, and able to do so much more. And we started that work in early 2000, 2003 to be precise, and continued that on how do you take the power of these GPUs to do amazing processing. And about 6 years ago, we were named one of the NVIDIA Centers of Excellence in GPU computing. Here at Maryland, one of the things which is a unique strength here is the Human-Computer Interaction Lab. It has pioneered so many of the human-computer interaction technologies we take for granted here, starting from the hyperlink, this was, Catherine Plessant working with Ben Schneiderman have been doing a lot of pioneering work here in touch interfaces. Alison Droin has been working on new interfaces for designing interfaces for the children's libraries. Ben Biederson has been working on zoomable user interfaces. It's amazing. With the advent of these commodity sensors that can sense where you are, what you are working on, or even perhaps almost what is it you're about to work on, this is a very nice technology and expertise we have right here on the campus. The third area is high-resolution portable displays and understanding of the images in those. So this is work in computer vision and visual computing. For the last 60 years, the computer science department at College Park has been one of the leaders in understanding, interpreting, analyzing, and processing large amounts of imagery data, whether from cameras or from satellites or from large number of video archives. It's been amazing, right? All the way from processing every scan that the post office takes of your address to figure out what zip code it is going to. So with these kinds of backgrounds, we were in a really good position to be able to make an impact on this new field of virtual reality. So in August of 2012, the campus invited us to submit proposals for the NSF competition on the major research instrumentation. Each campus is only allowed to submit 3, and in August we submitted this. This is now, we're talking about almost a year before Oculus was bought by Facebook. And at that time, it was becoming clear that this field was going to take off. So we submitted a proposal on Augmentarium. The campus picked us up, and it was funded for $1 million from NSF and the campus with matching funds. And this was really good. So I was recently relating this to our president, Wallace Lowe, being a little bit proud that we could sense this. And he said, if you knew this was going to take off, why didn't you do a startup? And I thought, oh my God, the standards here are so high. But the ones who really did that startup were the 2 students here, the 2 undergraduates, Brendan Neary, Michael Antonov, together with Andrew Rees, who did this Oculus VR startup, which was bought by Facebook. And it is incredible for somebody in their 30s to turn around and give back such a large fraction of their net worth to their alma mater. I mean, this is so inspiring. $38 million for a new building of computer science here on the campus. And all of us were so excited. We have been talking about doing something for the undergraduates. So a group of us on this campus got together, and we are now giving finishing touches to a planned new major for undergraduates in immersive media design. We hope, if everything goes well, this might be launched as early as FY18, but this is keeping a lot of fingers crossed and a lot of hopes high. In addition, the Maryland State Legislature just 2 weeks ago codified this and said that we would like to invest in this new Center for Economic Development and Entrepreneurship at College Park, one of whose areas would be virtual and augmented reality. So this is going really, really well on our campus. So here are some of the areas we have been looking at. Public safety, healthcare, STEM education and outreach, innovation, entrepreneurship, and I'll be talking about some of these as we go forward. So in public safety, one of the major advances that have happened in the last few years has been the ubiquity of cameras. And the main reason this has happened is they have now been attached to smartphones. If you look at the sales of digital cameras, the sales of standalone digital cameras have declined because everybody carries one of these with them. The other thing that has been happening is the advent of gigapixel cameras. These are cameras which can shoot images that are equivalent of 300 to 500 of your regular images all together. So one of the things I'll be talking about is how do you make sense out of this large amount of data from these images. So this is a 4.5 gigapixel image of Mount Whitney in California, and this shows you the level of detail that is in these images. It's a single image. How do you now make sense? How do you decide where to zoom in? Our ability to acquire imagery has far surpassed our ability to meaningfully analyze it. So one of the things we've been working on are algorithms that will help us make sense out of this data by using principles of human perception and human saliency. So these ellipses are what our algorithm thinks are most important. In this case, it was a horizontal log because it was looking at the orientation as a contrast. But then all the other things it finds are the hikers. Imagine having an 8-year-old kid getting lost in the national park. Even if you have a set of drones flying over that region with gigapixel cameras, how do you now go through that large amount of imagery to analyze where should I focus? In this case, there was no predetermined template for us to use. One of the characteristics of one of the big problems with the big data is we don't know what we are looking for. If you know what you're looking for, you can always write an algorithm to look for it. The challenge is finding the unexpected. What this algorithm is doing is finding anomalies, the salient anomalies in this very large big data. And this can be used in a lot of other big data applications, and that's where we are headed with this. One of the applications of augmented reality will be in scenarios such as counterterrorism, on the battlefield, and in disaster response. When you walk into these scenarios, they're highly unstructured. You don't know where your allies are, where your friends are, where the potential threats are. This kind of information, once it can be calculated and computed, could be presented to us in a meaningful way. One of the challenges here is, of course, to be able to present it in a way that is not overwhelming to the end user. And this is where further research is needed in understanding how is it that we are able to use our retinal hardware and our computational capabilities of our brain and our mind to be able to parse through the incredibly complex and rich real-world environment around us without getting too overwhelmed. How can we use those principles of visual understanding into these new interfaces of augmented reality? Another area where we are very focused on, and this has been very, very exciting, is the work with the R. Adams Cowley Shock Trauma Center at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. This is the nation's busiest shock trauma center. 9,600 patients are admitted into this center every year. These are critically injured, almost dying people with bullet wounds, fractured bones, having fallen from various places. And these guys, this amazing group of physicians at Baltimore Shock Trauma Center, gets 94% of them alive and well on their way out. So with them, what we are looking at, this is a part of the University of Maryland Empowering the State initiative. This brings together researchers from College Park with the healthcare professionals at Baltimore. And what we're working on in this case is devising computational and visualization tools to help the surgeons while they are carrying out the surgery. How can we enable and transition the amazing advances happening in visual computing and translate them into the setting of an operating room? And one of the things that and so over here on the left is Dr. Sarah Murthy, who is one of our collaborators. And with her, what we are looking at is how can we use an array of cameras to fuse the data coming in from this array of cameras into a virtual environment that can be navigated and looked around from different directions, from different points of view, for students, residents, interns, evaluators to understand the controlled chaos that is in a shock trauma center. So right now, what you're seeing here is being recorded by a camera array of 12 cameras. We are looking into designing much bigger camera arrays and looking at algorithms and data structures that will be able to fuse data from all of these camera arrays. It's a very daunting task. If you try and open more than 2 videos at a time on your desktop, you'll start to see jittering. They will not be able to decompress and render in real time. Here we are talking about fusing thousands of videos all at once and creating this kind of a virtual environment. This could also be a very powerful way to teach residents and interns on surgery. One of the ways they understand surgery is by looking at the most extraordinary cases. Extraordinary cases don't arrive every day. If we can compress the most interesting extraordinary cases in a virtual environment, which is immersive, so that the person feels they actually were there and they actually witnessed it, can we now use this to be able to reduce the training time, but not the effectiveness, from several months to a few weeks. Another area where augmented reality can help a lot is in making sense out of the amazing amount of information that is available to the surgeons in real time. Right now, there are more than a dozen monitors spread around the operating room. They are giving you all kinds of vital information. They're giving you the preoperative CT scans, MRI scans. They're giving you the vital blood oxygenation level, blood pressure, heart rate. Instead of having the surgeons look down at the patient while they're performing the surgery and then look up at the monitors to figure out the context and look back down, why can't we have all of this imagery be overlaid on the patient at the right place? If we can give our Air Force pilots heads-up displays with the real-time critical information that is available to them, and we've been doing this for the last 20 and 30 years, why can't we do this for saving lives in operating room? So one of the things we're looking at is what does it take to take the real-time imagery coming out from simple modalities like ultrasound and have that be available as they're doing it on the patient, looking at the patient as opposed to looking at the monitor over here and doing the probing over here. Ultrasound has become very compact now. Augmented reality headsets are becoming compact to the level where you can even perhaps use your smartphones to do augmented reality. This could be one of the most portable ways to look inside the human body that can go to far off rural areas with no other means of technology other than this portable ultrasound and augmented reality visualization. So that's one of the things we are working on. This is an example of how one would be able to fuse data from, right now this is one of the projects we have just started using 1,200 GoPro cameras, looking around at an operating room, fusing the data from these and transmitting them. One of the challenges right now is if you're not in a major metropolitan area, you cannot get first-rate care. using this is a visualization of what can happen in the future. This is not, we're nowhere close to this, but imagine a future where you can not only get the world-class expert located right in your neighborhood, but also the world-class experts from anywhere around the world to come and together talk about, analyze your case, and bring the very best of expertise from around the world to solve your healthcare problems. So this is an example of how right now we are doing this on a 2D curved screen that we call the augmentarium. But in the future, this would be inside of an augmented reality headset where people are immersed in these procedures. These are examples where one would be able to look at from different views, from different places around the world, what is actually happening. One would be able to zoom in, zoom back out, change your point of view from different directions, and participate and comment on a surgery. This could happen in real time. This could also happen offline for education and training scenarios. So those are some of the possibilities here. Another area we are very excited about is using virtual reality as a tool for education. What you see in the right image is Dr. Jan Plain. She's the director of Merrill Center for Women in Computing. And every summer, she teaches a summer camp to the middle school girls for learning how to program using virtual reality. Last summer, there were 45 middle school girls who learned programming through virtual reality. And I can tell you, it is so much more exciting to learn computer programming by shooting asteroids or walking amongst the dinosaurs using Unity than sorting a bunch of numbers. and that's what they got. I mean, this was so amazing. This will change the way computer science education happens. Here's an example. This was an asteroid shooting game that the girls created on their own. We did not tell them to create this. This is what came out of this experience. Another thing I'm very excited about is the work that is being done by Professor Ramani Doraiswamy. He has been working on the area of 3D sound for the last dozen years. He graduated almost 6 PhDs, has a dozen patents filed with the Office of Technology Commercialization here at the College Park. And what he has done is delivered over a regular pair of headphones. You can perceive 3D sound, where not only can you distinguish what direction in this plane the sound is coming from, you can also distinguish whether the sound is coming from above, below, front, or behind, down to the level of what direction the sound is coming from. This is truly revolutionary technology, and it is being now used. It has been licensed by Oculus for the use in the new consumer headsets, and is also being used. Is also being talked about by a lot of electric car companies for the use in the electric cars and other places. In the grocery stores, augmented reality might help you find that one cereal box that is gluten-free and peanut-free and sugar-free and has the right level of carbs for you. Another thing we are very excited about is our work with the Philips collection. Instead of seeing paintings and artwork and listening to audio tours, which after a while, frankly, audio tours now. Can we create more immersive, engaging visual experiences for people there? If you are at this boating party, can you perhaps hear some possible potential conversations that were happening? Can you step into the painting? With the Claire Smith Center for Performing Arts, we are looking at how virtual reality might one day be able to start a new genre of the performing arts. Much like the camera gave birth to the movies from the theater, if you have a completely new way to immerse and experience a world around you, how would that change the performing arts? And that remains to be seen. I think we are just now seeing the very first glimpses of it in the 360-degree videos, but I think a lot more is going to come our way. Right now, these headsets are big and bulky and look like a scuba diving gear, but remember how the cell phones were. And I remember, and some of you are too young to have had that experience, but they were big, they would run out of battery, they were bulky, and they had just 2 lines of text that were visible. Something similar is going to happen with these. They're going to get smaller and smarter and better and lightweight and high resolution. Hashtag Augmentarium, please tweet about us and go to our website. Thank you very much. While Graham is setting up, if you have one question, please let me know.
Question? One question? Oh, come on.
There's a bunch of
I got one over there and one here.
Okay. When you're talking about the headsets getting so small, how small do you think that they'll ultimately get? And I'm thinking, would it be a contact lens?
There's this new contact lens that can measure your blood sugar level, right? And I think we are still a ways away from that. But maybe one of these days, really, maybe one of these days. There was a news a couple of days ago about Stephen Hawking working on this nano light sail, spacecraft. The work that is happening in nanophotonics, phased arrays, and in MEMS is truly amazing. I wouldn't be surprised if we are able to miniaturize this at that level. But not for the next 5 years. Thanks.
So we're gonna.
Hello all, thanks for having me again. And as was mentioned, so I'm a senior editor at the New York Times, and I'm focusing on new approaches in video, motion graphics, immersive storytelling, and most recently, this thing we're calling virtual reality. So to give you a broad idea on the non-virtual reality side, this means projects like Snowfall, which is a multimedia reading experience about the death of 3 expert skiers from an avalanche. Inside the Kronos Quartet, which is a visualization of the famous quartet performing and discussing the subtle elements of musical communication in the group. A New Whitney, which is a visual piece of architecture criticism that we developed with Times critic Michael Kimmelman. And most importantly, maybe, Bieber, Skrillex, and Diplo Make a Hit, which is a visualization of how the 3 collaborators made their chart-topping Where Are You Now?
Second half of the first drop goes double time. Right? It's a little more up-tempo.
If you compare it to Painter, it's like, so much of the process until the 11th hour is literally just getting colors, right? You mix a little this color and that color, and like you create a new shade and a tone that you maybe haven't seen before.
You take that sound, right, and they play with that sound for like an hour until it's perfect.
Probably if he sees this interview, this is the first time he's heard anybody's heard any of the other versions.
Had to make sure you at least saw some Bieber. That is all the Bieber, I promise. So my interest in virtual reality, it really started after I attended the 2014 SIGGRAPH conference, which is this graphics and film conference where producers and thinkers on the future of computer graphics come together each year. And this particular year, there was one thing everyone was talking about, and that was VR and AR. So I was really curious, what could this mean for journalism? And it also seemed like this kind of natural progression from the kind of things we were already working on. So returning from the conference, I started to emphasize that we should start treating this new medium seriously. And my home base, which is the Times' graphics desk, began to build some resources so that we could conduct research into how we might produce this work, from shooting to computer graphics, audio, interactive, as well as distribution. And simultaneously, the Times Magazine was exploring VR by partnering with a developer to create our latest app, NYT VR, which you should all download. So the app was launched with a VR project called The Displaced, which was produced in partnership with an outside production company called Verse, and also included a partnership with Google as well, in which, as was mentioned, we distributed 1 million Google Cardboards to our print subscribers. So this actually, I thought, was a brilliant advantage to having a print paper product, as this was, we had, this vehicle in place for bringing VR to the masses. And, from my perspective in the newsroom, this was really incredible because it instantly created this massive market where none had existed before, and it really solved the biggest problem, which was, how is anyone going to see any of this stuff we're making? We're not really in the business of just producing work for conferences and festivals, which was the only place VR was really being seen. And part of the reason that VR has this opportunity to explode right now is because every one of you is walking around with VR technology in your pockets already. And something as simple as a folded piece of cardboard can unlock that capability. So in essence, if I were making a TV show and no one owned a TV, we just mailed you the TV. So that's a game changer, right? It's in an instant. It made the Times the biggest VR platform out there in the moment. And I've had a lot of people in this VR space, come to me and say how important that was for the fact alone that it kind of created a wave of awareness about VR. So the first VR film produced by the newsroom is called Vigils in Paris. It's a virtual reality film that captures a city in mourning after the terror attacks that occurred a week earlier. And it's also the first VR project from the Times that was produced completely in-house. At the time of the attacks, our camera rig was with a few members of our department for a test run related to another story in another country. But we decided to send the rig to Paris, and with a video producer, a journalist, on a flight right away. And there she met with another video correspondent who would be able to help with the shoot. And we actually trained them over video chat from New York, how to load cameras in, how to run the rig, what the best practices were. And we were really encouraged when we actually got something usable out of all of it, which was a big question mark. So, we started to do some reporting. Where were visuals emerging? Mostly expected locations, but it was still up to the videographers on the ground to really find the best places to put this camera. And, as more shots started to come in, at first we were like, maybe we'll just do one moment, but we got a lot of great stuff. And we started to make a more, ambitious piece out of it. So I edited the shots together in this case so that you begin at the Place de la République, and then there's a fade to a day shot at the same location. And then from here, you travel to two restaurant visuals where there were attacks, and to the Bataclan concert hall. And then in the end, we returned back to the Place de la République for kind of a more hopeful moment, and end the night with this spontaneous moment of singing. So the app can work in both Google Cardboard mode and smartphone mode, or like magic window mode. So if you download the app, you can try it out. And it's really awkward to kind of show it in these settings. Virtual reality as a flat thing that you've always seen. So the best thing I could come up with is like I made a screen capture of me using it in Magic Windows smartphone mode. So I'll just show you a little bit of the Paris piece, and then you can check out the rest on your own.
J'avais besoin de venir pour faire la paix un peu avec moi.
I had to come here to find peace, to deal with my feelings. I didn't bring flowers or candles, but I just felt the need to come pay respects to the victims. I was very affected by what happened. I couldn't focus on my studies, so I simply had to come. To be Muslim now is to prove that we have nothing to say. Even now, I know our religion will be profaned. People who did it are not Muslim to me. They're terrorists. That's it. It's inhumane in my opinion.
Their goal to terrorize people won't work as long as we keep our spirits up, remain lucid. We keep on smiling because we're lucky to still be able to smile.
We need to move on. These people are gone. I look to the sky and tell myself, he won't be back, but he'll remain in our hearts forever.
So you guys can check out the rest of it on your own. But what I think is really amazing about this new medium is that we just have this incredible opportunity right now to define what it is and what this can be as content creators. And I don't think that's something that happens all that often. And as a journalist, I think there's also another layer of thinking about this as well. How do the rules and the ethics we've applied in the past adapt to this new medium? One small example, an interesting element of VR, maybe from a transparency perspective, is the lack of a crop. Yes, there is camera placement, but when you choose a shot in a traditional video, you're essentially making editing decisions by what you include and exclude from the frame in that moment. So with VR, I think you kind of give a lot of that back to the viewer because you're capturing everything. In a traditional role, the journalist is behind the camera, making subtle and important decisions involved with framing. And VR kind of takes that away to some degree, or at least makes it different in a way that I think we're still discovering. So now there is no behind the camera. You actually have to run away and hide half the time. But there still is the framing of where the camera's placed, which is incredibly important. And I think as VR develops, we will, learn how this compares to the more traditional role in camera work as we've known it. My colleague Ben Solomon put it in a way that I like, which is to describe traditional filmmaking as hunting with a rifle versus VR, which is more like setting a bear trap. And empathy is certainly the buzzword surrounding VR. The idea that if you are there's no longer this distance created by the frame. And as a result, viewers maybe gain stronger emotional attachment or connection to the subject. And I think that is really possible, but it's really not guaranteed either. I think it kind of depends on how well the shots are constructed and whether it's a compelling story that's being told, just like any other medium. But I do find it intriguing that VR relies on a viewer's perception and discovery of content and not just the cuts and frames that are decided on by an editor. So the next VR film the newsroom produced is called The Contenders. And in this piece, we try to give viewers a visceral sense of each of the campaigns of this crazy elections frontrunners by putting you in with the crowds as buses arrive at diners and also at rallies. So I'll just show a little bit of this one. Same sort of setup.
In small diners, banquet halls, and sports arenas, the presidential candidates have staged events to stoke enthusiasm among their supporters or persuade the undecided. Over the months, the scale and tone of the candidates' appearances have more clearly shown us who they really are. Ted Cruz loves campaigning in rural towns, at restaurants and workplaces. People who turn out usually like him or support him already.
Oh man, I should have worn my shirt. I didn't think about that. You should have called me and told me to wear my shirt.
I didn't know you had one.
Oh yeah. Doesn't everybody in town have a shirt?
He's got everything.
He's got it all.
There's nothing I don't have.
Cruz events have a neighborly vibe. He sounds like he's confiding in you. His voice has emotional, breathless urgency. It can cast a spell.
This is our time. If we stand together, we will win the Iowa caucuses. If we stand together, we will win the primaries, we will win the nomination. If we stand together, we will win the general election in November 2016. We will defeat Hillary Clinton. And we will turn this country around and bring back this exceptional nation that each and every one of us loves with all our hearts.
Amen.
There's palpable energy among Bernie Sanders voters. They tend to be young, on the edge of their seats. It's like they can't wait to start cheering.
So let's hear from the man himself, the future president of the United States, Bernie Sanders.
So you guys can check out the rest of it. So yeah, I mean, with a piece like this, the challenge becomes about access. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So here I am explaining to Donald Trump what a VR camera is. Just let you absorb that for a second. Trying to convince him to let us get close enough for VR to make sense. You can't be like in the back zooming in. You got to be like, can we put this on stage next to you, basically. So he was pretty into it, actually. So, and you know, the other challenge is the unpredictability of it all. We had 3 rigs, 6 shooters, constantly moving them around to try and get situated in these really hard to get to spots. And, you know, VR at the moment is really a medium that demands control, and this is the opposite of that. So, you know, we're really learning as we go and trying to figure it all out, but it's an exciting process as we go. And so our latest VR project, which is not out yet, which will be released this May, but is actually premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival on Monday, if you're in New York, is a bit of a leap forward from the others. It's called Seeking Pluto's Frigid Heart, and it's an experience that takes you 3 billion miles from the sun on a trip to Pluto. And it's entirely generated visuals, but it's built from photography and from data captured from the New Horizons spacecraft. So I can't show you the film, but I can show you the background. So about a year ago, that's what Pluto looked like to the world. Essentially a blurry fuzz of pixels. And, in that time, a lot of artists would create artist renderings of Pluto. But these were just best guesses off of that tiny blur of pixels, essentially. And same thing with on-the-ground scenes of Pluto. But again, just artists' interpretations of what maybe existed off of a few pixels. And that really all changed last summer when New Horizons flew by the planet. So this is an actual photo of Pluto and its largest moon, Charon. And this is, as New Horizons flew by Pluto, it also took this amazing photo of Pluto backlit by the sun. And this simultaneously revealed that it had an atmosphere and that it was blue. So in the VR, we actually can take you even closer than the New Horizons spacecraft. Through the data collected, we're actually able to place you down on the planet's surface at several spots. One, which is a spot just above what's called Pluto's pale heart, in a location that's been named the Aladrisi Mountains, which is right there. So we worked with NASA and the Lunar Planetary Institute on this project, who helped us to create accurate extrapolations, essentially, of what it would look like to stand at these locations. So this is an early image of one of the places in the film that we bring you to and allow you to look around. And this is a look at the terrain mapping that LPI was able to provide us, created from the images New Horizons took as it passed by the planet. So you have a single light source, you have multiple images, you can recreate a terrain even without LiDAR or that kind of data. So we're able to take that, and this is an early test of us using of camera movement created with our virtual VR camera. So in the film, this appears all in rich, accurate color. And we also give you a view of New Horizons itself using a model that was developed that's really just accurate down to the screw. It's very cool. And very shiny. So in 3D software, we combine the models, data, and photography, and basically virtually film it in virtual reality to create the VR scenes. So this is like a little screen capture of us messing with it in Maya. And we worked with science experts on staff to accurately align where Pluto and the sun would orient in space with the stars. So this is all then rendered out at extremely high resolution per eye and edited together in Premiere. So here you're basically seeing the left eye over the right eye. And so in an Oculus, a Gear, a cardboard, anything like that, each image is delivered to the corresponding eye, which gives you a stereoscopic experience. And these images are rendered in what's called equirectangular projection, which allows it to then remap to a sphere, undistorted. So this Dennis Overby, who's an amazing science writer, is the narrator of the piece. And here he is looking very cool with the Samsung Gear. So we asked a lot of people around the office to take a look, and other science editors to give their input. So one of the newest features of our app, and this was touched on a little bit, is the ability to use positional audio in the films, or basically a sphere of sound that corresponds to the visuals. So when you move your head, the sound moves around too. So I wanted to do something special with the soundtrack for this, something that would live up to the power of this imagery and the novelty of the imagery. And I wanted the music to live in this positional audio world. So what else to do? I wrote a 4-part vocal chorale. Why not? Soprano, mezzo, tenor, and bass. And so brought 4 opera singers in to a studio to perform and record it around a positional microphone, which basically captures all of that sound in 360 degrees. So this is at Doubleday Studios in downtown Manhattan. So now, basically, as you're viewing the VR, you look around, the voices swirl around you, and I just think this kind of brings the music into this world of this new medium. So, I mean, it's amazing to me to think about the things that had to happen for this experience to exist, period. Essentially, so the year I graduated college, humanity sent the fastest spacecraft it had ever built, on a one-way trip, 3 billion miles to the edge of the solar system. So 10 years later, it arrived, and I guess in the intervening 12 years, we developed mobile, high-density screens, and then ultimately VR, so that, we could create an experience using this imagery and data captured to basically bring anyone who wants to go there and experience it themselves and to understand it. So, yes, going forward, I hope that we can cover news stories even faster with more time spent on the creative side and less on the production side. And, we're just excited to really explore what really works here. And I believe that we're at the very beginning of this. I think the term virtual reality is really like an aspirational term right now. But I think we can really imagine where this technology goes as it improves and the market grows. And I think that's incredibly exciting. Thank you.
And it's going to go to Jamie.
A little more Bieber.
A very quick question.
Yeah.
Like 1,000 questions. Are there virtual reality cameras available now? Because it looked like the camera you could
That's exactly what it was. Most of this industry is made of cardboard and duct tape at the moment.
If somebody wanted to try it, can they go get a camera? Or do they have to?
Yeah, I would say at the lowest end, you can buy a Ricoh Theta. That's $300. If you want to do 360 video, it's a pretty good entry point into this. I mean, it depends on, it really comes down to, you can take that question, you can go really off the rails with it, like what is virtual reality? What do you need to make it in the first place? I mean, is 360 video virtual reality? For now, I think we're saying yes, because it's good for branding. But, no, I mean, because it's, I think, the lowest viable thing that can give you a sense of presence somewhere, which I think is sort of the barrier for calling something virtual reality. And yeah, there are lots of two-lens solutions that will make post-production not horrendous that you can do. All right.
So my job is to give you the innovative imagery story here. So you've heard a lot about VR, and I'm going to touch on that just a little bit. Because once upon a time, images were pretty straightforward things. There were points in the world that got rendered onto flat planes or spheres or a position in a VR image. So it was kind of a mapping process from things out there onto things in a viewing device or on a piece of paper or a piece of glass or something like that. Then computing happened, and every assumption you had about imagery has been questioned, changed, or tested in some interesting way. So I couldn't resist by starting by showing you how to see ahead, literally. This is a... I'm sorry. But I couldn't resist because you've seen MRIs before, but I wanted to show you this little video clip from Beckman because it's a incredibly interesting piece of video, once I figure out where my cursor, there it is, because it shows you an MRI of someone singing. Now, the reason that's interesting is that typically traditional MRIs have taken many minutes, right? This is real-time MRI at 100 frames a second. So you get the idea. And it's not Bieber, right? But you get to see this guy singing, and you can see the articulation of the muscles in the throat, of the tongue, and the pharynx, and so on and so on and so on. So this is, in many ways, a real different kind of image, right? Think about this. This is a cross-section of a human's brain in real time, right? Now, the reason I wanted to point this out is that you can sort of imagine that's a 2D slice through someone's MRI space in their head. But once you've got these things collected as voxels, that is little pixels that take up space, you can do anything with them. And that's the magic of computation with imagery. Because you don't have to just look at that slice, but you can look at that slice. Okay? You can actually see ahead, right? And what I like about this is the sort of through here perspective, right? Now, there's a lot you can do with computation, right? There's a lot you can do once you've got imagery that you can manipulate and be malleable with, right? So, for example, as you know, you can project it onto your little display that's hanging in front of your eye. So this is Google Glass, which has not, as a product, failed. It has merely found a better niche. And there are top people working on this right now. But the idea was that it would give you information in sort of a hands-free, time and space available kind of way. And so as you would be driving down some road, say near here, you would see the directions right overlaid in front of you. It was the head-mounted display. So this idea has been around for a long time. But it's the image in your head, in your eye, in your overlay of reality. This is the augmented reality, one form of augmented reality. So you could do it this way. Now, one of the issues about VR has been, how do you share it with other people? So Graham pointed out this, I'll show this to you, but you have to really be in it to experience it. And he's right. But if you're trying to teach a class with VR, it's really hard. So recently, Google came out with this system called Expeditions, where you can basically, I could hand a Google Cardboard to everybody in the class, and I'll say, okay, class, let's all go to Machu Picchu together. And we launch that video. Now what happens is that there are shared points in that space, say this particular perspective, and those colored dots, those are 3 kids out of the 25. They're all looking somewhere else, right? But what I can do as the teacher is say, okay, everybody, we're going to pause at this location. I hit the pause button, and that pauses everybody. It freezes your view. And we can now collectively go to the next place in sync. That's a different boy band, right? But you get the idea. Now all of a sudden we start to have these devices that can communicate to each other, and we can have a shared VR image experience. So someone earlier mentioned the idea of a contact lens. We don't quite yet have a contact lens display, and that's a really hard problem. Amitabh is absolutely right. It's really hard. But we could do something like this and put a camera in a contact lens. So this is a patent that Google filed a couple years ago, April 2014. And it uses the same technology and technology base as this is the contact lens that we developed for measuring glucose in your chairs. The same idea is that you can basically have a transmitter and an antenna, which is that copper rings you see around it there. And embedded, instead of the glucose sensor, you have a little camera. So when you blink twice, it can take a picture or whatever the magic sequence would be, right? So all of a sudden, we're really getting your perspective, right? Now, I'm bringing this up to think about what imagery means in a world where the acquisition and display and manipulation of images is all up for computational grabs, right? What can you do? One thing you can do that's sort of interesting is to spin imagery on its head yet again. Now, you know what time-lapse photography is. That's not the surprising part. The surprising part about this project that was done at the University of Washington in collaboration with some people at Google is that you can take crowdsourced imagery from potentially thousands of people of a single location over time and aggregate it into a single time lapse. Who's the author? Well, it's another 1,000 people long, right? So what you do is you go to Google Images or Flickr or something like that, and you put together a compilation of images that are all time-stamped from a single location, because tourists always stand here at the end of Lombard Street and take exactly the same photograph. So rather than just waste all those pixels, you could actually do this. So here's an assembly of that into a time lapse. Now watch the trees and watch the flowers. This is 2 years of Lombard Street.
Oh, wow.
Okay? What's happening here is we are crowdsourcing time. We're crowdsourcing this. I'll show you again because this is fantastic. Crowdsourcing the evolution of the plants, the evolution of the trees. And because it's crowdsourced over so many people, the people who are wandering up and down in the cars are all washed out. Right? It's the trees that are the permanent residents, the bricks that are permanent residents of that place. This is an interesting twist on the notion of a single photographer, single image, single source. I'll show you another image here. Now this is, again, something you've probably seen before, but maybe not in the way you might have thought about it. This is a geostationary satellite, Himawari 8, Japanese space program. But what's nice about this is they just put these images out. There's true color images in a directory on the internet somewhere. So if you're a person who's interested, say, in the weather patterns over Australia, they're just out there. You can assemble your own time lapse. This is what I did here. Right? This isn't crowdsourced time lapseography. This is just the Japanese space program putting out these things and me realizing, hey, I could put these together. What other opportunities are possible? So once you start to think about these things as these images as computational objects, all of a sudden you can start to think about them as being interpretable objects. So one of the key ideas behind big data is that we can datafy stuff. That is, we can take data that we've got locked away for quite a while and then reinterpret it by potentially writing little parsers or little pieces of code that will extract out features and data from stuff that you didn't think was in there. Here, for example, is a Google Earth image of some cows in a field. Not surprising. But some enterprising graduate student wrote a cow detector. I'm not making this up. A cow and deer detector, and then looked at the alignment of all those cattle and discovered, yes, they mostly align north-south. This is one of the more amazing papers you will read in your life. I mean, this is the probability of each of those cows as extracted from Google Earth imagery. Interesting, right? Datafied Google Earth imagery of all these cattle and discovered that they stand in a particular orientation, perhaps dancing a particular kind of dance. But nevertheless, there's stuff you can do ex post facto, right? We can, for example, take these same images and do what's called hyperspectral analysis. That is, we're going to look in different spectrum bands. If you've got that data, you can look at it, for example, in the upper left corner, the way you normally look at it in RGB space, we're like red, green, blue, color space. Or you could take the infrared band or the far ultraviolet band or whatever and start to reanalyze it in interesting new ways. This has been done for quite a while in the space program, which can take these images and discover how much of a particular area is used by agriculture. This is all in oats, and this is all in barley, and this is all in soybeans. Easy to do. Take that same idea, build a hyperspectral camera, and point it at people, and you discover something totally different. All of a sudden, now you can look at someone's face with these different kinds of IR and discover, in this case, this person's got a lesion on their nose. It's not a drunkard. It's just a person who has a particular skin condition right at the edge of their nose. Or here in these hands, you can see, by looking in near infrared, the pattern of veins because the heat distribution is different in the hands. You can now start to do this in real time. Image now is not just a single space, it's multispectral, it's aggregated over time and analyzable. So we know, for example, that you can take beautiful pictures like this, these nice drone pictures or aerial photographs, but you can do more with them. In the same idea that you can start to move into a picture. Again, here I'm just zooming, but notice what's happening. oh my gosh, it's 3D, right? We at Google got this. This is just a classic Google Earth kind of move, right? I just zoomed in here on the Transamerica Pyramid, except look carefully at that. I'm sorry, I'm going to roam over here. Is that okay? Okay. So this image right up here is just the Transamerica Pyramid, but look at the top of the elevator shaft. It doesn't quite stitch together right. What's going on with this image is it has been accumulated by LiDAR, by light ranging technology, to build a three-dimensional model, and then images of the building have been stitched on the outside. Except around the corner there, where it doesn't stitch quite right. There's some computational issues there. You can tell that something funny is going on because there's a weird shadow down here, and some of the windows aren't quite lined up. Right. But what's happened is we've taken a 3D model of the building, which was collected by a device like that. So those Street View cars, they've got LiDAR. That's those boxes, those tan boxes, 3 tan boxes on the bottom. And they're constantly scanning the trees, the buildings, and all that jazz. They then take that data, upload it to Google Earth, and say, hey, here, and we have a program that assembles the LiDAR data into volumes, into the buildings. And we've got all those pictures, those Street View pictures. We extract those and paste them on the outsides of the building. That's how you get that. Is this an image? Well, not really. It's synthesized using classic computer-aided design 3D imagery along with some clever computer texture mapping. So once you start thinking about this, you go, wow, what else can I do with LiDAR, right? LiDAR is fantastic because not only can you look at buildings and get their 3D shape, but you can point it down from an airplane or from a drone, point it down at the ground, and start to discover the 3D shapes here. Now this is particularly cool because when you shoot a beam of light, well, a really good beam of light, straight down at a jungle, you get a couple different bounces. You get the first bounce when it hits the canopy of the trees, and you'll get the second bounce when it hits whatever is underneath that. So you throw away the first one. I don't care about the trees, but I care about, as you can see here, all that other structure that's in this place in Cambodia, or all these lions in this particular site location, or if you go to, as was recently done in Caracal in Belize, here's a temple that we've known about for a long time. But darn it, there's a lot of jungle around it, and that's really tough to get through. I mean, you really have to literally hack your way through the code. No, the jungle, right? Right? So when you do that and you take a look at it with LiDAR, the temple I just showed you is in the upper part of that blue point up there. All this other stuff, for example, the terraces you see here, these terraces, nobody knew that they did terracing there. That's a discovery, just by using a different imaging technique. So these constructed computational images open up new ways to look at the world. Now, one way to look at the world is, as was shown, we have these 3D cameras, and we have Street View cameras. Some of them, like the one I just showed you, we put on cars, we drive around. But we also have ones that you can take around underwater. We've got the tricycle version of this, and we've got the backpack version of this, and that's the Street View underwater camera going through the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and this is what it looks like. You can go to Google Maps right now and do a fly-through underwater. And we've got a lot of places like this. If you're really interested, we've extended the notion of Street View to underwater, to on top of mountains, inside a building. So if you're interested, go to the White House on Google Maps and you can walk through the White House. Same idea. It's the same VR 360 immersive video, underwater, top of mountains, whatever. Now, take this idea of image as computational device, computational object. And you know, for example, that we have OCR, optical character recognition technology. So we can take an image like this, and I can run this on this is just Google image search on my phone, do that, and then say, oh, by the way, could you translate it? And yes, it can. Notice what's happened here. It hasn't just translated it, it's put it in the same font and the same color in the same location. That's a clever bit of code. So, which is the real image here? Okay, all of a sudden, image is computational. Image can be transformed. It can be looked at through different frequency patterns, and we can do things like translation in real time. When you start to think about this computational property of imagery, all of a sudden new ways of looking at the world literally happen. So these guys at MIT have done this really nice work on image amplification. Now, I know what image zooming is. What is image amplification? It means you find local features of the image and then magnify that property. So, for example, here they've taken this picture, I'll show you side by side, of this baby, amplifying the color shift as the baby's heart beats. So watch the one on the right. See that flashing? That's the heartbeat. That's the baby's pulse as seen through its skin. It's such a beautiful shot, I gotta show you again, right? And if you look at the pulse rate monitor just out of the frame here, you can see it's actually in sync with that flashing. Color amplification. They did the same trick here for motion. And here's a crane somewhere in Cambridge where they've taken the pixel by pixel analysis, and you can see that crane wiggling back and forth on the right. You'd be worried if you saw that in reality, right? But it's actually waving back and forth just a little bit in the breeze. And they're supposed to do that, right? They do that. But now you can see the same thing here. You can see the microsaccades, again, with motion amplification. This is a powerful idea, that you don't just have the image and you can fly around through it. That's a cool idea. But the idea that you can modify that with respect to interesting properties is fascinating and deep, I think. Because there's some really nice work being done at CMU and a few other places, but this is the best video I could find. This is 3D model inference from an image. Okay, what that means is you can take, for example, Google image search or something like it, look for that chair and say, oh, that's IKEA model 295-6, right? Then you go over here to this 3D library and say, I've got a 3D model representing that thing. Now what? Now you can write the code that will allow you to select that object in the 2D image and do this with it. Okay, if you map the object to the 3D model, you can manipulate the 3D model. And for example, we're going to pick up that taxi. Pull up the model, the 3D model of the taxi, overlay it with that image, and all of a sudden you can manipulate the taxi in the image. Do the same thing with classic warplanes. You see what's happening here? The image is being manipulated in ways that you don't think of Photoshop as being able to do. Right. That origami device, that's not CAD animation. That's photo interpretation from an underlying 3D model. Right? So I have to show you this because it's a fascinating thing to see. Look here. Stop. Okay, see that under bottom? You can't see that in the original photograph, right? Where is it coming from? It's coming from an offline 3D model that someone made of a taxi. You're doing the stitching, and by the way, you see that where those people are standing up there? That's where the taxi was. Why isn't there a big gaping hole there? Because another algorithm does in-painting. It fills it in based on the surrounding texture. If you're a Photoshop wizard, it's kind of like the healing brush, right? It's exactly that thing. It's taking pixels from here, saying, oh yeah, you probably go here. Your eye does this with your blind spot. Your eye, you actually have a visual gap right about, in me, right about there. I actually can't see you, but my eye is filling it in. We've now automated that process. Okay. Computational transforms the way we think about images. So here, for example, a few pictures of my daughter. This is Google Photo. This is just running on your computer right now. These are just pictures from my personal family collection in the cloud somewhere. I said, search for my daughter Katie. You can see the query up there in the upper right. Okay, and naturally I get some pictures of her there. So the next query I do is interesting because it's Katie by a lake. Okay, none of these are tagged with the word lake. Now you might think, well, that's pretty good. That's the ocean. I'll call that a lake. Then you can see the pictures across the bottom. That's my daughter by a lake. Great. What's up with the one on the upper right? We're at Lake Tahoe. The lake is behind me. I'm taking the photograph. It knows where I'm standing and has made the obvious inference. Okay. okay? This is a very interesting thing because what's happening is computationally, we're getting better and better at labeling these things. So, for example, there's this technology that does automatic image labeling. There's the paper, you want to read it. These labels are applied automatically. They are inferred from the image by the underlying neural net. Nobody wrote those labels, okay? So the upper one is labeled as a person riding a motorcycle on a dirt road. Below that, a group of young people playing a game of Frisbee. Now, mea culpa, or at least truth in lending, we don't always get it right. Here it says 2 dogs play in the grass. So close. Right? Or these, right? I particularly like the one on the bottom right. A refrigerator filled with lots of food and drinks. We do what we can, you know. It's getting better, and that's the thing about these machine learning things, right? They get better and better. You kind of just leave them alone for a while, and they get to be kind of smart. And I want to leave you with one last image, which is that Facebook has recently turned on a version of this, which is a fantastic thing to see, because they've got this as an accessibility feature. So for blind Facebook users who do not know what image 21-4.jpg is, they handily provide this label. Image may contain tree, sky, outdoor. This is fantastic, right? This is computational human augmentation of imagery. So images are really more than just maps of pixel points under a surface, but they can be these voxels, it can be crowdsourceable, analyzable, sometimes in different frequency spaces, and finally they can be interpreted and literally make our world understandable in ways that are deeper and richer. Thanks very much.
I suppose, since you all already had the question, we should first open it up for a question specific to Dan Russell. Does anybody have a question they'd like to ask him? If not, I'll come up with one. But he showed us a lot of really cool imaging techniques. No obvious questions? All right, I'm going to shift just a little bit then, and I'll ask something that's probably on the minds of people in here about Google and virtual reality. I'm wondering, what is Google doing in the way of virtual reality? I assume it's doing something. Can you tell us anything about it?
Well, you know about Google Cardboard,
yes,
right? And there's a few other things. There was the new, what's it called? The new Google Viewer thing? The
C1 glass.
Yeah, the glass thing. Yeah. So there's stuff like that's happening. We have a pile of people in a building I can't get into
secret building
who are working on various VR things. So I can either confirm or deny they exist, but they do, and there's stuff coming out. I mean, we've actually had some history of this. So, for example, we had the Sky Map came out a little while ago. You can just look at, hold it up, and see Beetlejuice is right there. But there's new stuff coming. I honestly don't know what it is. Watch this space.
Watch this space. Very good. I'd like to now open it to the audience questions. I'd like to ask each of you, when you ask a question, identify yourself to the speakers, if you would. And why don't we just start right down front? You go ahead, sir.
Peter Senior, I'm a senior producer with the museum in Washington, D.C. And a lot of questions were coming to mind in looking at those text captions with those pictures, right? And, you know, the choice of what to put there as words is so subject to interpretation. The one with the person on a motorbike could be a Sunday well spent as opposed to someone driving a motorbike. But
or evil, horrible person.
Yes.
Right. Not to give you a spin, but yeah.
But I noticed some of those things are starting to interpret, like a trick performed on a skateboard. How do you get from these are some people with a skateboard to this is a trick being performed?
It's a really good question, and the secret is there are these machine learning algorithms that take lots and lots and lots and lots of labeled photographs and discover the features that identify the mapping between those features in the image and those particular words. So it's a little bit like Google Translate, you're looking at strings of bigrams and trigrams and so on, and looking in one language and mapping them to another. Except in this half, the input language happens to be of photographs. And so the machine learning mechanism basically identifies the salient objects and knows what those labels are, and then tries to identify collections of those labels and how those go together in English phrases. So think of it as a translation system that's going from terms, objects, to most likely collocation of those terms. Do you see what I mean?
It's building off of a legacy of keywords already connected with those images?
Yes, that's right. So if, for example, 3 dogs, at night, would have had to be a previously existing photograph. The good news here, for example, but the beauty of the internet is there are trillions of photographs that have cute little labels underneath them, and mostly people tell the truth, and sometimes they will add interpretation, right? My evil brother, that kind of thing, right? But mostly they say, my brother jumping into a lake. And that's how we learn those associations.
I can see the slippery slope with it, though. Like, what if the majority of photos of Trump say, like, terrible person or something, for instance, and then, like, you post it, and you're an objective journalist, for example, and all of a sudden your photo gets tagged with sort of an opinion of a politician,
right,
or something.
That's right. That would be true if that happened. On the other hand, there are a lot of Trump supporters posting, the wonderful, glorious, great leader.
Right.
You learn what you learn.
That's right.
Another question out there on Messenger.
So, just sort of thinking ahead with VR, and I know it's basically impossible to predict the future, but I'm guessing when you all are doing this sort of work, you have some ideas or some thoughts on, 2, 3, 5 years from now, what sort of applications we might be looking at. I'm not necessarily asking you to predict, but just, I don't know, what do you talk about when you think about the future of this thing?
So, so there are a few that are very close. One is augmented navigation. One is guidance for mechanical CAD assembly, followed by repair further down. Repair is more unpredictable, so that would be further down. The experience of putting somebody somewhere where they weren't expecting to be there is already beginning. One of the things that makes it so interesting is the emotional component of it. So when you, so one of the work I've been working on is visual saliency, which is contrast in the visual channels. The same contrast occurs in emotional channels. When you find yourself somewhere where you are not, it tends to stick in your head. When you find these unexpected experiences, in the video that in the 360 view that Graham was showing, I wasn't expecting to see somebody who might have lost their eyes in the French calamity, and this is the kind of thing which would stick. Looking at and finding something that wasn't expected. Now, when you see a photograph, you know what you're expecting. It is framing of that shot. But when you see something and it wasn't in the shot, and you turn your head and you see, then discover something for yourself, that is likely to stick. So I think these emotional experiences are also something that are almost here and are likely to get magnified a lot more in the next few years.
So, Graham, you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about how we might use more interactive experiences, where instead of it just being a passive thing, you're making choices and moving around. Maybe right now the problem is really on that we can create those experiences somewhat, but there isn't a good way to deliver them. So it sort of depends on how fast the market for that gets there, and then figuring out how we might want to tell stories in that way.
So I like that a lot, and I think the killer app for VR in 5 to 10 years is going to be entertainment. You can easily imagine being a character. You can be Captain Jack Sparrow, right? Or you can be a dolphin. Or you can be both. Exactly. Or Keith Richards, right? I mean, imagine being in a VR environment where you've got the sounds and the visuals and you can jump around and you can do the whole thing, right? I think, there's going to be a lot of other predictions. That's going to be where the money is.
Thanks.
Okay, in the back, yes. You right there, yes.
So I'm Dana Rodriguez. I'm an undergraduate at the University of Maryland, but I'm also here with the DeVos Institute of Arts Management. My question to you regards, when we talk about virtual reality, we talk about immersion. And there's something really interesting to having, you see things in virtual reality, but how do you incorporate the rest of the 5 senses? So, I mean, there's haptics, but how do you see that kind of thing playing out? Maybe in journalism or maybe in medicine. If you're practicing a surgery, would you have to feel that out because you have to feel how to use, a tool when you're practicing? Or how does that play out into the actual real world application of your technologies?
So this is a great question. Visual feedback and the auditory feedback is light years ahead of the other 3. The haptic, the taste, and the smell. Haptic is, there are a few devices out there which can convey that sense. There's basically 2 or 3 main thrusts that are happening. One is using a robot arm whose end tip you hold. And this is the phantom haptic arm, and you can feel by moving the tip. The other one is these exoskeletons. You put your arm into exoskeleton, and then when you move, the exoskeleton breaks your movement at a certain point, giving you the illusion of a virtual obstacle in the world. There has been some very fancy work in which they throw puffs of ultrasonic energy from different directions, which comes together is pretty much like air cannons, but then where it meets, you have a sense that something is happening there. It's not as pronounced. There are these pressure pad. There are these gloves you wear, and there are a lot of small bubbles that inflate and deflate very fast. And you can slide your hand under a virtual faucet and feel the drops, which don't make you wet, fall on your hand. So there are these very primitive components. Now, the sense of smell and taste is very, very rudimentary, and it's not quite as developed yet. So those will be much further down. Right now, it's just the level of presence you can feel just by auditory and the visual is amazing. And to be honest, there have been some research papers on what fraction of our perception depends on these different senses. And the visual and the auditory are the most dominant ones for general situations. For specific situations, they can, of course, vary.
I'm just having anxiety about having to produce smells. I don't know. You go to a movie for sight and sound. You go to a restaurant for touch and taste. Maybe they should be separate. I don't know. I actually at a SIGGRAPH conference, there was this really cool setup where you put this thing on your nose, and they just gave you sugar cookies, and by pumping different smell cartridges to you, the cookie would taste different. It's a really interesting experience. But I don't know. I think for news, it's going to be a while. I hope.
So smell-o-vision is still back. It's still many years in the possible future. I agree with you. Although I would up you on that, it's 50 years, 100 years in the future to get decent smell and taste. On the other hand, haptics, I think, has huge potential. Partly because there's tricks you can do with haptics that I don't think have been fully explored yet. So, for example, by having a simple actuator that you can use at high frequency, as you, for example, drag your finger across, say, a touchpad, you can make it feel like sandpaper. You can make it feel slick. I mean, there are all these incredible tricks. For example, if you've got a grid on the screen, you can actually feel a little like a raised bump. There's no raised bump, but it's all haptic tricks. So I think there's a lot of potential there. I don't know how you're going to produce it.
Actually, I mean, R&D was working on something like that. I didn't try it, but they were like, you could like, it feels like velvet or like what you're saying. So it's interesting.
I have a dead .com to recommend to you. So in 1999, a .com company raised a lot of money, millions of dollars, from venture capitalists to send smells over the internet. And I just thought that was one of the silliest things I'd ever heard of. It didn't go anywhere. Next question here, Raphael Lorenzi.
So, Graham, you talked about this being sort of its infancy in journalism and storytelling. And some of the storytelling possibilities are obvious, letting someone go to Pluto, but they mainly feel explanatory and, I don't want to say featurey, but as you guys start to look at what you can do with it, have you thought of investigative journalism, or, is there a way, much like the image of the I forgot what you called it, but the pictures that let you see inside the forest. So is there some investigative way that you guys have thought about this?
I think we're exploring all of these kind of options at this point. It's sort of project by project, really. At this point, it's hard to look too far in advance of these. But because there are limits to what the technology is allowing us to do right now. I feel like in some ways we're already bumping at the edge of it. So a lot of it is like I was saying, just kind of have to do with how much the market sort of matures, so that we can take it even further away.
Karen Aspen. My name's Karen Aspen. I'm a PhD student here at Merrill. First of all, there was a movie called Polyester that had a postcard that you scratch and smell. I just wanted to look at to that problem. Today on NPR, there was a program that talked about how easy it was to podcast because it was so inexpensive, and they asked a podcaster, what's really important, and she said, what you need is a point of view. Right? That was the big important thing. What you were talking about, and I think all of you had one theme in common that was like sense making, right? The picture where there was an algorithm that would detect, what's what makes sense to look at closely, and obviously the image is almost like crowdsourcing meaning, right? And you, of course, are talking about how you're giving the audience the power to make sense of this. Now, I've talked to a cameraman that I work with about VR who says, what's my job? So on one hand, the journalist is the sense maker. On the other hand, now we're giving the power to the audience. So there are, I think, a lot of people in the journalistic profession who are kind of wondering, what does VR make us?
It's a really good question, and I think it's something we're still trying to figure out. I think the problem probably stems mostly from us looking at VR from the perspective of what filmmaking has been, rather than the fact that it's a completely new medium that requires a new language and a new way of thinking about it entirely. And that's almost impossible to do, and I don't think, because that just happens naturally over time, and I don't think that we have really figured it out. We're just trying to learn. And one example that I've been giving over the course of today is, as a way of understanding what VR could be as a new medium it's easiest to kind of look backwards and look at other times that new mediums have come to be. So if you look at like photography, right? When photography first came out, there was no art of photography, and people were making instant paintings because you were taking the language of painting and sort of projecting that onto this new medium we didn't really know what to do with yet. And then, of course, photography over time and matured into its own art form. And I kind of feel like the same thing is happening here. I think we're still making like round traditional films in a way, and not really letting it be its own thing.
Can I ask a real quick follow-up? Do you actually collect the data from your users? Like, can you see, how many people are looking at the sky, how many people are checking out people's feet, how many people are looking for where's the soundbite coming from, and then do something like what you're doing, sort of like create personalized VR in a way, or stories that match the habits of people?
Well, so our app right now doesn't do that, but there are apps that do that. And Facebook does that. They can actually create heat maps of where you're looking around the space, which I think I hope we'll have that really soon, because it would be amazing as a creator to learn if anything you're doing is working. But maybe that's a wrong way to think about success or failure. Maybe it's like a success is that it shouldn't matter, that like wherever they're looking around, they're discovering interesting things.
Can we dig a little deeper into this question of defining the new medium that you all touched on today some, and you asked a good question about it. What characteristics do you really think makes virtual reality fundamentally different from other mediums? So presence, a sense of presence, I heard you say, because, if you look back to the dawn of internet news, this is a question that we all asked when we were defining it in the early days, and the one trait that we quickly realized was its interactivity, its two-way nature of communication, which at first we talked earlier today about we were pasting JPEGs on screens, and that was news, and weren't taking advantage of the power of the hyperlink. What traits of this new medium do you think journalism really needs to, storytelling, not just journalism, but storytelling really has the potential to define it as different?
Well, I would say one thing that struck me is when you had that great picture where you showed the crop. And one of the bugs with cropped photographs is it completely directs. This is what you do as a photographer. You direct your attention there. This is what I'm going to show you. When I got one of your New York Times videos, 360 videos, I could look over here. I could see stuff you may or may not have intended for me to see.
Yeah.
Right? So the ability to look in a non-directed way and dig more deeply in a kind of a sense-making way. So I can see, I see there's a crowd of 10 over here that are being tear gassed, but there's a crowd of 3,000 over here doing nothing. Right? That would be an interesting story. You may not tell me that story in the story, but now I'm curious. And so I think that ability to be non-directed is really interesting.
You all have thoughts? Do you have a thought?
Yeah, so I think one of the things which has always happened whenever a new medium has come about is this diffusion of power to the people. And so one of these, in the early 90s, there was this company which was a father-son team of doing laser scans for people. And they would scan a person, and they would take the scan points and produce a CNC milling machine to create a sculpture of the person. And they very quickly found out that this was a losing business. And it turns out when the sculptors created the sculptures, they added these noble features on people's faces, and which this 3D laser scanning was getting rid of. It was like a hand-drawn portrait versus a photograph. And over the years, one of the things that photographers, in the beginning there was straight photographs, but then they evolved into better lighting, better angles. And then came this whole era of photographs on the cell phones. Anybody could shoot any boring thing and put it on the internet, and everybody, all their friends would come and be obliged to now like it. And this whole thing where we started from something that was highly curated, highly patronized, and go and have anybody use it and produce it and have others consume it. I think this is where this whole, in the case of journalism, this is where this is headed. We will soon have, I'm sure of this, it's only about 3 or 4 years, these 360-degree cameras. Everybody would have it on their smartphones. They would be good, more sophisticated compression algorithms, and you would actually have a much more accurate sense of what is it that was happening. There have been photographs of, there was this one thing where monuments in Mexico were photographed
on the day when the trash collectors were on a strike. And you had this impression that the Mexicans don't take care of the national monuments because there was all this trash piled up on front. If I go back to the Lombard Street example that Dan was talking about, well, if you have that kind of ability, you would be able to see, well, no, Mexicans do take care of the national monuments. So this kind of, where the consumer is the director, gives you this freedom of observing what happens. I recently went to the turf game, basketball game. And believe it or not, this was the first game I had been to on a basketball court in almost 20 years. I don't go and watch these games. And it was amazing. The sound, the people, the number of people.
Did they win? Did they win?
No, we lost. But it was amazing, the experience, the emotional feel of the crowd around us. And the first thought I had is, wow, this is what it feels like to be on the stand. And if that could be conveyed to others, I mean, it could be really very, very powerful.
So we are nearing the end of our program here, and as we do, I'd like to give each of you an opportunity to just share any parting thoughts that you have. I didn't give you a chance to answer that question. You might want to talk about that, but you can each talk about really anything that you like, and why don't we start with you?
All right. So this company, Verse, there's the director, Chris Milk, he's famously said that VR is the final medium. And which is maybe a little flowery, but I think what he's trying to say is that that's maybe what the real promise of VR is that it's that he's calling it the final medium because it finally gets rid of all the barriers. There's no frame, there's no interface. It relies on one thing, which is your perceptual system. And if you're only relying on your perceptual system, that's what makes it this virtual reality, and that maybe that something happens in your brain when you're just using just your body and to interact with this thing that will make you more connected to it. And I think that is maybe on a high level the promise of this.
So would you like to go next, Tommy?
Yeah, so I totally share Graham's vision. There are a few scenarios I've come across recently. And they all have to deal with these kinds of mirror worlds or virtual worlds that are being thought of. So one example was of a startup company I recently came across that is creating a virtual world where you throw snowballs at snowmen and other cool characters. And this is as a therapy for victims of second and third degree burns who are lying on a hospital bed, cannot move, are in constant pain and agony. And this was joint work with, I think, the singer, musician Paul Simon and somebody else. And I tried it on, and it was so cool and relaxing. I mean, it was, wow. I mean, now you can take a patient who's bedridden and transport them into these worlds. Imagine a grandmother sitting somewhere, and now with this medium, she could play with her grandkids far off in a distant land. These kinds of experiences they are just within our reach, and I think will happen in the next few years. And these kinds of experiences up until now were just not possible. So this would be a really remarkably powerful medium for us to communicate with and experience these new feelings and emotions that sometimes we take for granted, but just when they matter the most, they are sometimes not accessible to us.
And I think that 360 video is going to be the greatest thing ever for investigative journalism. If you remember back when there was the recent Crimean crisis, you remember that? A lot of Facebook photos came out of Crimea from Russian soldiers and so on, and even though they were not supposed to do that. And so there was sort of inadvertent photography getting out, sort of by accident. Imagine that you've got a camera that takes 360 pictures, and people are posting those on Facebook. They're going to be looking here and taking that picture, not thinking about all the people behind them. There are going to be more leaks per week with 360 Facebook photos than you have ever seen before.
Yeah, but you can augment them all.
I predict that's not going to happen.
You'll see everyone's heartbeat.
So I want to thank our fabulous panel.